den rechten.
Bir müşteri olan
Den rechten Teil an der Nordseite.
Moving forward.
I'd like to talk about the use of bicycles, something which is not at all credible in peri-urban areas. But is it just a matter of belief? Of course not. The issue is not to believe or not in bikes, but we try to take an objective look at things, about it, and to really see things as they truly are. That's what I'll try and do.
So people don't consider the bicycle as a realistic means of transportation, although it does exist a lot in Northern Europe, in Scandinavia in particular. And so let's look at the situation in France. What is the share of the bicycle in transportation? And these are various cities in France or various areas of France. You have numbers, but you see there are major differences between the center of France, where you have a significant increase in the use of bicycles, and in peripheral areas or in peri-urban areas, where in fact there's less use of bicycles. So let's look at Strasbourg and in and around Strasbourg. In 1988, there were more cyclists cycling in the outer rings of Strasbourg than within the city limits, and now it's the other way around. There are more cyclists within Strasbourg than around and outside Strasbourg, and that is pretty typical of towns or big cities in France. Well, why is it? Well, under pressure of automobile traffic, cyclists take refuge in the cities. I mean, they first tried to stick to the outskirts of the city when there were not too many cars, but now cyclists have been basically driven away from peripheral areas. That's in France, but in Northern Europe, in particular in Germany, if you look at the central urban areas, you have bicycles account for 11% of all means of transport, 10% outside the cities, whereas in France, it's so these are almost similar numbers, whereas in France, it's 3 times as many people cycling within the city than on the outskirts. And then there's another technical consideration. Automobiles today, the automobile system is effective, especially in the peri-urban areas. You have many roads, you have, of course, the local authorities have worked hard to make that possible. You know what I mean by automobile system, so it's not just the roads, but it's also cars that are technologically effective. You have a maintenance system, and so you have a well-operating system. Not the case with the bicycles, because the bicycle path network is poorly designed, poorly maintained. There are few interconnections, etc. Bicycles themselves are not very effective, and the cycling population is not very much experienced, so there are all sorts of reasons. Now, that's where things stand today, but let's look at the potential, looking at the city as it stands, and the peri-urban area as it stands today. I'm not here to criticize it and to say whether, let's just take it as it is and see, given the context as it stands, with its dissemination, with its sprawl or whatever you want to call it, you want to see if within that context there is a potential, there's room for growth for bicycles. So somebody give the number, say 18%, as now we stand at 2 or 3% now. Of course, that seems a bit optimistic, but on paper, you can see that. You can see why people resort to bicycles, depending on the density of the city. So it's okay to walk or take the subway for the center. Nearby, you may wish to take a bus, or you can cycle. Now, in peri-urban areas, bicycles are still possible, but you would probably need support from trains or something when the distances are longer. Now, these numbers have been worked out in Grenoble. Of course, that can be done provided you create pathways or parking areas for bicycle, and that doesn't cost much. That's easy to do. And that would mean if things were done properly, you could have a huge potential in some cities. If you look at the case of London, I mean, you could have as many as 25% of all movements on bicycle, including a lot in outer London, outside the limits, the city limits. You move on to the greater to Greater London, and a significant portion of that can be covered by bicycle. Now, you have different ways of working out that potential. There can be arguments about the numbers, but without getting into too much technical detail, another survey based on a different methodology, but still acceptable, it says that as much as 49% of all movements could be done on bicycle in the greater Lille area, Lille being a city in the north of France. And that survey is brand new, a study that was conducted in the northern part of the country. So you get maps like this showing that the share of employed people working within their towns or less than 5 kilometers away from the town, a good proportion of them live in such conditions, and that accounts for a significant portion of the peri-urban area around Lille. And then there was a survey conducted by Bresse and Mariol on the Carré Picard, and that's a little square area in the north of France again, between the four cities of Saint-Quentin, Soissons, Compiègne, and Laon, I beg your pardon. And you had that 80% of the jobs, people go to work using a shuttle bus less than 10 kilometers away. 30% of working people work within the area where they live. And you can see that people travel less than 10 kilometers to work, and that is a significant number of the people. It doesn't mean they can cycle to work, but when it's less than 10 kilometers, it becomes possible. So the potential is right there. How can you turn it into practice? What kind of solutions can be implemented to bring out the potential? Now, some of the ideas. You have to agree on the diagnosis. You have to say that the pathways have got to be suitable for cycling. And of course, you have to have access to poles of attraction, and so we've seen the example of shopping malls, but there are other places you'd like to be able to cycle to. There's that. It's also a matter of distance, and there's only so much you can cover by bicycle, but it's not as bad as one might think. And so there are two types of solutions. Number one, having less automobile traffic, as was the case in Nantes, and having a well-linked and continuous network of bicycle paths. I mean, it seems straightforward, but there you have it again in Nantes, where speed limits are brought down, making it therefore more compatible with bicycles. Now, let's look at other countries. In the Netherlands, they have these bicycle high-speed ways, expressways, as it were. And you have a national cycling association that is in favor of these cycle expressways, and it's called the Fietsbond, where they're looking at all the technical aspects, the kind of asphalt you should need, how to prevent black ice, that sort of thing. So they're really looking at this from a technical viewpoint. That's the Netherlands. In Copenhagen, there's the equivalent. You have the super cycle pathways with 26 routes with as much as 300 kilometers. In orange, you have a line that was inaugurated in May, 22 kilometers right there. And so this is happening in and around Copenhagen. Of course, basically in Copenhagen, it's a matter of enhancing existing bicycle pathways. And then in Strasbourg, this is back in France, there is an existing network, and the idea is to make it more suitable for bicycles. So it's improving the asphalt, removing or replacing crossroads by roundabouts, etc. This started back in 2011. It should be completed within 10 years or so. And there you have it. This is a direct imitation of what goes on in Copenhagen or the Netherlands. There are other projects in France. Bordeaux has been working on it as well. Now, let's take a look at the bicycles themselves. Bicycles themselves can be improved. This is a snapshot. You can see that using a light bicycle, now, of course, they get more expensive, but you can improve the energy performance of bicycles with the electrically assisted vehicles. You can double the energy performance. The lying down bicycles, there are very few of them in France. On the left-hand side, you have a picture. You're basically not sitting but lying. And then what is known as velomobiles. I mean, using the same energy, you can go 3 times as fast, only using the pedals. There are no engines at all. Now, of course, if you combine this electrical assistance, that is where you generate, you have a dynamo where you can take advantage of the energy accumulated downhill to go further uphill. You can add. You can double the distance covered. So it is no problem at all to cycle 15 kilometers to work or anywhere because of the ease of operation. So there are many uses also of the lying down bicycle, where you cycle or you pedal lying as opposed to sitting on the saddle. There was a study conducted by or for the Cycling Association. They found that by 2050, or at least half the bicycles will have will be electrically aided. In other words, they'll have dynamos in them. Now, we're not talking about electrical bicycles. I mean, the assistance is that you generate electricity by pedaling, and that charges up a dynamo. That's what I mean by electrically aided bicycles. They do not have an electrical motor in them or anything. Now, you only have 3 minutes to go, but I'll be right on target. Now, how can you reconcile peri-urban life and bicycles? You have, well, some of the you have some values. Individualism, you have to see that a bicycle is a very individualistic. I mean, it is individualists who will use bicycle more so than people who would like to share everything, including public transportation. But it's also people who like to do it yourself, repair their own thing. The people who fix their own houses, like they often do in peripheral areas. They are people who would also be happy to tinkle with their bicycles. You can, rather than purchasing a second car, you might wish to purchase a bicycle. So there's some environmental considerations. The idea is also to be able to travel more cheaply. These are considerations. I mean, these are the reasons why people might want to. I mean, assuming all the facilities have been put in, that's what would prompt somebody to use a bicycle. But at this stage, this is it's a far cry. People are not using bicycles very much at all. So France is really lagging behind. It seems unlikely that we will be able to catch up. Even I myself, less than a year ago, before I started considering these issues, I did not even think for 1 second And I didn't even think for a second that you could cycle for any distance at all in peripheral areas, and it's only by studying this closely that I found that there is indeed a potential, and this is not this is not a figment of the imagination. This is something that can be done. Now, cities are going ahead. They're not waiting for the research to be done, but there's a future for this sort of transportation and for bicycles as well. Now, you can see that there are other aspects. If the environmental crisis persists, if the economic crisis persists, well, then the bicycle could be seen in a different light.
Merci beaucoup, Frédéric Héran.
Den Rechten.